Right, what's going on, everyone? As I stated a few weeks ago in one of my videos, I was saying how I'm going to try and make more gym and health focused content. And so I'm going to live up to that. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my personal thoughts on one set to failure training, better known as high intensity training or HIIT. And I'm just going to be giving my experience with it, what I like, what I don't like, who I think it's for, who I don't think it's for, as well as some overview of the history of it, and who the forefathers of high intensity training are. So, first of all, what is high intensity training? It's not really necessarily defined as one set to failure training, even though that's what it's become synonymous with, especially in recent times and with the whole 2023 2024 hit trend or hit wave that hit the internet, no pun intended. I feel, yeah, I'm going to talk about that later. I feel like there was good and bad that came out of that, but what it really is a focus on the intensity of the exercise and how close you are to hitting failure, or most likely going to or beyond failure, and rather than focusing on the volume. So, what it really boils down to is high intensity, low volume. And it was Arthur Jones in the 1970s who originally came up with this. Arthur Jones, he's the inventor of Nautilus machines. He's an absolute revolutionary when it comes to the design of exercise machines. Not only that, but also some of the ways we think about exercise, especially within the high intensity training community. Arthur Jones was an absolute dog, and he was a great businessman as well. And that's kind of, I think, his downfall a lot of times was that he was a salesman. Not only he had some he definitely had some intelligence when it came to training, but people didn't really buy into high intensity training off rip because Arthur Jones, he was the first one to really conceptualize it, and make training programs out of it. And he trained Casey Viator. I'll get into him in a sec. But Jones, he came at a time when bodybuilding was dominated by this idea that more is better. And he said, no, like, wait a second. What if it's not, right? If more was better, then 1,000 sets would be better than 20 sets per muscle, right? So that was kind of his main idea. And so he said, Let's backtrack a little bit and let's think about the intensity of exercise." And I think a lot of his ideas were great, but he was also a salesman, he was a businessman, so people didn't fully buy in. I think largely due to that. But one of his clients, you could say, one of the people he trained was Casey Viator. Casey Viator was an absolute dog at bodybuilding in the early 70s. You can look him up. Dude was stacked. And there was a famous experiment, the Colorado experiment. I'm probably going to do a video on that later. I do plan on doing a full video because I think it deserves one. Basically, Casey Viator was trained by Arthur Jones. If I'm not mistaken, it was Arthur Jones in this experiment for about like a month. And based on the scans and tests they did, he gained 63 pounds of muscle. And so I don't necessarily know how all true that is. I mean, maybe he did, but I would put an asterisk on that because Viator was just coming off a car accident. And so muscle memory and the regaining of that lost muscle has a lot to do with that. He was just coming off the recovery period. And so there's nuance to it, and it'd be kind of fun to do a video on it because it's so widely debated Holy voice crack, bro. It's so widely debated. um, so I'll probably do a video on that later. And after these guys, after Arthur Jones and after Casey Viator, I think he was a Mr. America for a time. Then came Mike Mentzer. Mike Mentzer built off these ideas, and he certainly got extreme with them, especially later on in his life. I think he went a little bit too far with some of the ideas, but nonetheless, he was an absolute dog himself in his prime. And he really brought high intensity training to the mainstream, to the main stage, because he was so freaking stacked. You know what I mean? And so in 1979, he was the Mr. Olympia heavyweight champ and the only Olympia contestant to score a perfect 300 by the judges. And yet he lost the overall title, which is insane. And then in 1980, there's the controversy. Many said he should have won. Instead, he took fifth place, according to the judges, and people just do not buy that. Arnold won. That was very, very sleazy. Very interesting competition. Maybe do a video on that, honestly. So Mentzer really popularized this idea of one set to failure, one balls to the wall set per exercise, per muscle group, to failure and beyond. Rest up, recover, go back to the gym a couple days later and do it again. This was very novel for the time, even compared to Arthur Jones. If you look at Arthur Jones' routines, some of the exercises were two total sets for the workout. They were three full body workouts a week. It was higher volume. And Mentzer said, wait a second, like cool down a little bit. Maybe we should go even higher intensity and even lower volume. And so that is the way we think. I think the way many think about high intensity training today is the way Mentzer thought about it and the way he applied it. Then Dorian Yates comes along about 15 years later after Mentzer's prime, 15 to 20 years later, because he went on a run. 6 Mr. Olympia titles in a row. The first mass monster. He was a dog, like legit. And he's got his old film Blood and Guts. It's his old like training film. It's so cool. It's so cool. And it revived high intensity training because he was trained by Mentzer at one point. And he certainly upped the volume a little bit, but with that he also upped the steroids he was taking. Just at the time, like, bro, the steroids they were taking were insane. So, there's certainly that. And yeah, Yates was really, I guess, the last great one to use high intensity training. But that does not mean high intensity training is not viable. I'll give my personal history with high intensity training. Um, and I'll talk about mine. So I started lifting in like 2022 when I was 12, and I discovered high intensity training the same year. A few months after I started taking lifting seriously, I started doing high intensity training. And I did it on and off for about a year. And it merited solid results. Although I wasn't consistent in terms of my programming, in terms of actually training hard enough on the one set. Just because I was 12, 13 years old, like, you're still just learning how to train to an extent. And so I ended up hopping off of it for a little while, and then I got back on it. I got back on it after, I think it was about a year and a half ago. I started doing it again. And this time I was going balls to the wall each set. And that was, I exploded. Genuinely, my physique got so much better off of high intensity training than it was off of the high volume training. And I will say, I don't think it was solely because I was doing one set to failure. I think it was also because at that time I learned how to really train hard and really put my all into a set. So there's certainly something to be said for that as well. But it taught me how to. And so I got crazy good results off of it. That's when I noticed my physique was really starting to blow up. Another variable to consider, if I'm going to be completely unbiased, is solely the fact that I was also hitting puberty at that time. So testosterone is soaring up. And so, of course, you're going to see maybe an explosion in muscle mass, especially if you're training alongside that. So that's my personal history. I still do train hit, not year round. Right now I am, and honestly, I've been doing it for about a month. I've already noticed some results. So hit in terms of pure size, if done right and if trained correctly, is super valuable and it's an absolute gold mine. Um, and yeah, I'll say like I feel like people got on it, and I'm gonna go into this. And around 2023, 2024, high intensity training was blowing up. Mike Mentor, I remember like Mike Mentor fan pages were everywhere, dude. It was crazy. And some people were seeing great results and glazing hit. And you kind of had like, hit was the equivalent I talked about on this channel, so I'm gonna say it. Hit was the equivalent of like what ortho bros are on the internet now in the religious space. That's what like the hit bros were in 2023, 24 in the lifting scene. And they kind of still lurk. And they were definitely annoying. And it garnered it a somewhat bad reputation as well. Not only that, but some people were like, I'm not seeing results. I didn't see anything. I lost muscle on hit. And honestly, I would say you did that because you trained one set and you didn't train it hard at all. You probably left 4 or 5 reps in the tank thinking, yeah, I hit failure, bro. Like the weight slowed down, so I hit failure. And it's like, dude, no, like that's not what happened. I mean, you did not hit failure at all. So that was another thing. With this trend, we saw a lot of people say, oh my gosh, I'm seeing crazy results off hit. Hit's the only way. And a lot of people on the other side saying, I lost muscle off it. It sucks. And that's probably just because they weren't training hard enough. So really interesting. It's kind of died down since. Yeah, I feel like it's left a lasting impression on the way people perceive hit. It's always been a controversial training style, and this is a video I want to tread lightly with in the gym space because it's a controversial topic when it comes to methods of training. I would say hit, honestly, my take, it's super valuable. If you have the balls to train hard enough and you know how to properly run a hit program, which doesn't take much research at all, honestly. What I would say is lift no more than 3 times per week. Do not lift on consecutive days and no more than 10 sets per workout and do one set to failure for each exercise. For me, I do like the Arnold split with 3 days per week. So I do chest and back, legs, shoulders and arms. Chest and back is like 5, 6 sets. Legs is 6 sets. Shoulders and arms is 5 sets. So that's all. One set per exercise. I hit failure, and then I might do a drop set, or I might do partials as well. So I train pretty hard. And if you have the guts to do that, if you know how to do that, you're gonna see great results. Just stick to the program for a few months and you'll see what happens. But but HIT or HIT isn't really all that good for strength. Now, in terms of general muscular strength, it's gonna be good. Of course, it's gonna be good. But if we're talking strength in a lift specific sense, say squat, bench, deadlift, powerlifting, right? That's the perfect example because when people think about strength, it's how much do you how much do you bench, bro? How much do you SBD, squat, bench, deadlift, right? Powerlifting is the ultimate kind of definer of strength in the gym world, and rightfully so. Those are huge compound lifts, and those three lifts hit all of the major muscle groups, really. So I think it's a really valuable and valid measurement of real muscular strength. HIT isn't really going to merit you good results when it comes to powerlifting because squat, bench, deadlift is a skill and it requires frequent enough practice of that skill at a high enough intensity to elicit an adaptation onto the muscle group, onto the uh, exercise itself, right? One set will not provide that. It just will not provide that. You need to be doing 3, 4, 5 sets, maybe even 6 and some at, not balls to the wall intensity, but enough to elicit an adaptation and enough to build technique and to build skill in lifting that exercise under a high weight. So I would not recommend HIIT to people who only care about squat, bench, deadlift, or powerlifting. I wouldn't recommend. Just because of that, I would say it would be better to stick to, your conjugate West Side barbell or your 5-3-1, something like that. Candido 6-week, Calgary barbell, all those programs are going to be much more better, much more suited for powerlifting than HIT. Um, that's going to kind of wrap this video up. I just wanted to give my thoughts on high intensity training, on one set to failure training. I'm probably going to do more videos about it, and I might even explain more in detail about how to make a program, something like that at one point. I think that's going to be very, very valuable. So that's going to wrap this up. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, God bless.